Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network. Of course, we're part of CARE, the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And our mission is to bring you the real news, what's really happening in our own backyards, in our communities, the places we love, what's happening throughout the world, right? In all of our different countries, and then what's happening on this planet. Because most people are starting to wake up and realize that what we're seeing isn't really real. Something is completely off. And if you are one of those people and you are brand new to UNN, you are in the right place. Our network releases a lot of content throughout the week. That includes in-depth news coverage. So we pick apart some of the stories that you may have seen, some of the headlines out there, and we take a step further, right? We really try to explore those stories, give you the history. That's what the team and I work on throughout the week. We also have amazing stories as told through the eyes of our field messengers. And these are everyday people who share what's going on in their community. We've got some great stuff that we're going to share with you today that was released earlier this week. We love hearing from our field messengers. We talk about the restoration of our planet and how we're creating what we call the new Earth. And we also talk about what's really happening boots on the ground with reports from the Global Intelligence Agency. So what's the deep state doing? And most people think the deep state are people that you see on TV. That's not usually the case. This is a huge network of individuals that are dropping like flies right now because they are mostly concerned about power and wanting to control people. And we are no longer in an age where that works. And that was up to God's source, the creator of the universe. And so those of us that are on the light side are fighting for humanity. We are fighting for all organic life to be successful, to be free, to be sovereign. And that's what's going to happen because that's what Source says. So we are working on that day by day and updating you guys on the whole progress. What you are listening to right now, this is a week in review. So I take this time to create this podcast for you guys each week to let you know of the stories you may have missed because we do put out so much content. It's possible, even if you're a member and you get instant access to all of our content, maybe you missed something throughout the week. This is also good for those of you who may have never heard of UNN before. Like I said, maybe some of you are listening right now, just clicked on it, happened to find it in whatever, your favorite podcast player happens to be, and it intrigued you. But maybe you're not ready to become a member yet. Maybe you want to learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do. So that's great. By the way, we do put out our content about a week later. After our members get it, we put it out on YouTube and Rumble about a week later. So if you want to go back in the archives, so to speak, and hear what we've talked about in the past, if you're thinking about becoming a member, fantastic. You can do that as long as it stays up on YouTube and Rumble, because as you know, we have no control over what they do over there. But we're happy to use their platform to get the truth out to everyone on this planet and even beyond, right? With all the content we release, we always encourage you guys, think critically, ask your own questions, do your own research. That is so important that you play an active role in this information. For too long, we were just consuming quote unquote news and not asking enough questions. Those days are gone because that's how people with, maleficent intentions try to take you over. And that is what's happened on this planet for a long time. So we're done with that. And then when you share something that really struck a nerve with you, something that you're like one of those aha moments, share that with other people you know. The way I look at it is it's your responsibility to share if that opportunity comes your way and you feel compelled to do that. And if you feel like the other person is or could be responsive to that. Don't just get out your megaphone and stand on a street corner and tell them they're all going to hell, okay? But if you feel like someone's willing to listen, it is your responsibility to share. What you are not in control over and what we really shouldn't be concerned with is what they do with that information afterward. Because, again, we're working towards sovereignty and we have free will, thanks to our Creator. And what they do with that information is not up to you. You may just be planting a seed that's going to be watered later, and that is totally fine too. But we're glad that you guys are with us today. Usually I kick this off with any announcements that I have. The only announcement that I have, and I'll probably share more about this in the coming weeks, is my family and I just got back from a trip to Washington, D.C., the nation's capital for the United States. Now, you may be wondering, Sunny, why on earth would you go to Washington, D.C.? Because it is the bed of a lot of negative things that are happening on our planet right now. And my answer to you is, as many of you know, I'm a mother and I have 2 amazing girls. I've got 4 kids total. I've got 2 older boys that are doing regular school, but I homeschool my girls. And one of the things I love about doing this is bringing our history to life as much as possible. And I know we've been lied to about a gazillion different things. But rather than my girls learn about the nation's capital in textbooks, I wanted them to see it in person. And more so than that, I wanted them to feel in person. Because as New Earth children, which I believe they are, they have a different perspective. And my mind was blown on what they could put together about what's really happening on our planet just by physically being in Washington, D.C. Like I said, I will share more on that in the coming weeks. So it was primarily for them. But also, I had never been to Washington, D.C. before. So I wanted to see, I wanted to feel. So no, this was not some UNN mission I was on. Did it turn into a spiritual mission of sorts? Absolutely. You know, it's one of those things that if you just keep going, when you get those little voices, you know, from source, from your guides, whatever you want to call it, and you just keep going down that path, things will open up. Crazy things are happening in Washington, D.C. right now, and we were in the middle of all of it, and I knew that it was source. And all I had to do was anchor the light and let source do the rest. So more to come in the future. Just got back at midnight last night, and now we're recording for the rundown. So let's get to it, shall we? Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. All right, kicking things off with our incredible field messengers. These are everyday people that just want to share what's going on in their community. Sometimes the stories are more focused on festivals and fun things that communities are doing. Sometimes they're more newsworthy, and we are getting more news type reports, which is awesome. We love that, and we just love hearing from you guys. So let's kick things off with Helen out of Australia. She went to an organic pantry who works with a lot of organic farmers. And it was a little concerning for her because she learned of a lot of struggle that's happening in the Melbourne area. There's a lot of market challenges. There's not a lot of support for these local vendors, for the people that are processing the meats and, you know, raising the livestock, all of that. In fact, one of the farms, I believe, said that their sales have recently dropped 70%. So that's 70%. And they also started talking about some things. I'm going to do a little bit more research on this because I think we can explore it as a news topic, which is how products such as Smart Fresh, which is kind of a version of Appeal. Do you remember hearing about Appeal? It's this chemical that can be sprayed on vegetables to make them last longer. Well, apparently this is happening a lot in Australia, perhaps other areas of the world. And Smart Fresh, this chemical that they're putting on vegetables, it claims that it can preserve it for up to 2 years. So you got to think, that may sound good at first, right? Because we've all had that situation of vegetables, fruits going bad. But if something is being preserved for 2 years, that is no longer organic. That is no longer what nature intended. And if it's doing that in the fruit, what is that doing to our bodies, right? So I'm going to do a little bit more digging about this Smart Fresh and Appeal, and maybe we'll do a news story in the near future. So thank you, Helen, for that heads up. All right, out of New Jersey, I think Amy has a couple of stories this week, but Amy, so New Jersey is a state in the U.S., for those of you who don't know, she does a home energy report. So she did her own little experiment, basically. You know how you get those things in the mail and it's from, whoever handles your heating and cooling, and they talk about how you can save energy at home, and maybe you just got to have, give up a little bit of some of your comfort, especially in the winter. You're trying to heat your home as much as possible, but, that's raising your utilities, all that kind of stuff. So Amy decided to do a little experiment to see if she could lower her thermostat for the recommended energy savings and see how that worked. So I'll let Amy explain the whole thing when you watch her video, but let's just say it was very difficult to have, at least in where she lives in New Jersey, it was very difficult to follow these recommendations. She was cold. In the video, she's like bundled up with a, jacket and mittens and all this kind of stuff. So sometimes what they're recommending doesn't necessarily work. There's got to be a better way, right? All right, Anne-Marie and Michael out of Switzerland take us to the Moderat Glacier. And they've been to this glacier multiple times. I don't think they did a field messenger report last time, but it is in Switzerland. And what they wanted to do is return to the site, I believe it was 5 years later, to see firsthand how much the landscape has changed. One of the things that we have talked about over the last 3-4 years, however long we've been doing the news, is how our planet is changing and how the environment on our planet is changing. And we hear a lot about climate change and all these buzzwords and stuff like that basically just spread fear. It is true that things are changing, okay? But it's usually for a good purpose. And that is the part that the news doesn't usually talk about, right? Because they don't have the large perspective. So in this case, Anne-Marie and Michael went to this glacier. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, if the glacier is disappearing, then that means we have global warming. Everyone's scared, running around, right? And that's horrible. And our, climate is going to be all off and everything's going to die. That is the narrative. But the thing is, what's happening now is life. Not just a frozen glacier. Life is returning to these areas. They show it in the video. There's a small patch of grassland now where a tree and other things are forming. So bottom line, don't necessarily believe the narrative. Are certain things happening? Yes, but what is the bigger picture here? It's the restoration of our planet. And that's what the Earth is doing. Okay, Monica out of Romania takes us to this beautiful garden city. It's called Iași in Romania, and it's known for its lush green spaces, rich history. Monica is great at getting us more familiar with the land in Romania. They have incredible structures there. A lot of her videos you really need to see to fully appreciate. But if you want to learn more about this gorgeous area and the architecture behind it, she said nearly 2 million flowers are planted throughout the city. And again, the design is incredible. She says it's this neo-Gothic, neoclassical design. So it's kind of like, this one image she was showing, it just looked like a beautiful kind of castle in the background. And of course, there's a lot of family festivities going on and people just really appreciating their area. So beautiful. Thank you, Monica. Emma out of Spain. So I think this is, Emma hasn't done a story yet. I think she has a couple, though, this week. So Emma takes us to the Mother Earth statue, and this is in Fuerteventura, Spain. It's a beautiful sculpture, and it symbolizes love, care, and our deep connection to nature. She says it's meant to welcome visitors as they come into the city and remind us of our importance and our relationship to Mother Earth. It is it's kind of like a stone kind of sculpture, but there is color in it, and the color symbolizes different things about the area. But it's this woman, right, Mother Earth, sitting on the ground, kind of crisscross applesauce, as my kids would say. I think she's barefoot, perhaps even naked, hard to tell. And it looks like she's looking down and cradling a baby, but there's no baby there. So the idea is she's cradling you. And I think Emma even gets up into the arms. That's how big this sculpture is. It's huge. So you can, it's a, what would you call that? It's more like a sculpture that you can interact with, right? So she got up into the sculpture and she's laying down like a little baby. It's just a nice reminder of how connected we really are to our planet and how that connection is coming back online. Okay, Rick out of Arizona shows us how to make stuffed poblano chili. But it's not chili. It's really chili peppers. And then stuff is stuffed into the peppers, right? It looked so good, you guys. I'm looking for some more dishes that my girls and I can work on together for dinner, things that are a little bit more healthy and easy to do. So, Rick, I am writing down this recipe. Very easy. You know, you cook the peppers separately, and then you come up with the stuff, all the good stuff that gets stuffed into the peppers. You do that separately. You combine it. You bake it. I love it. So thank you, Rick, for that. Helen out of Australia talks about, now this is more of a news story. So there are residents in northern Melbourne, and they are being fined for parking outside of their own homes during certain hours. So you might think, oh, well, it's dangerous for some reason. There's a good reason that they're doing this. Yeah, not so much. Helen was actually personally affected by this. So she got a ticket. And there's not people just walking around and marking up your cars, okay? She said there are actually magnetic strips under the asphalt that can detect when a car is there. And so they can detect this, and then they just send you a bill, I guess, in the mail. She said she had to pay $99. Here's the crazy thing. These are in areas that are just communities with no major traffic running through them. There's no danger. It seems ridiculous. So they can't park there. I believe it was from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays and 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. on weekends. And it just makes you wonder why, if for no other reason than to get more money out of people, because we really can't think of a good reason for this. And Helen also says people don't seem to be fighting back. And that's a problem, because if we don't address these and if we don't stand up to this, we just get more and more of it, especially as governments really start to struggle with their funding. Okay, John out of Australia. We have a lot of Australia reports this week. Talks about solar farms, and he actually took a drone up in his area in the Singleton solar farm, which used to be one of the biggest ones in his area. And this is about 24 years after they installed this solar farm, and his intention was to show you how things can degrade if solar isn't kept up. You know, we've done a couple of news stories on this as well, but it's really good to see, one in action that, John is well aware of, and he could kind of tell us a little bit more about the history of it. So if you want to see that and his drone footage, check out that report. He also said the land underneath it was very barren. So there's multiple issues, right? You've got technology that sounds good initially, but what about the upkeep? What about the recycling behind it? And then what is it doing to the land as well? And finally, we have Simone out of the UK, takes us to a beautiful place. It was a nice way to kind of wrap up our reports here from the Dorothy Clive Gardens, which is in the UK. What I love about this is this site was once an abandoned quarry, and it was transformed. There was a couple that got together and purchased the land and wanted to do something nice with it and just started planting different things. And parts of this area, at least now, because I think this started a long time ago, maybe the early 1900s, maybe even before that. But now there's parts that just look like jungle. Really pretty, exotic, beautiful plants, small little waterfalls, all over the place. And it involves plants from all over the world. And what I love about this is it really is a story of restoration, right? I don't know if you guys have ever had a quarry near where you live. Our last house that my husband and I lived in, and I think our first son was born and was in that house, there was a quarry nearby. And we would walk past it all the time, and it was just like, oh, what are you going to do with that land afterwards? And I feel like that's kind of where we're at as a planet now. We have been lied to. Our planet has been traumatized in a gazillion different ways. We as humanity have been traumatized in so many ways, even if we don't realize it yet. And we're now in this spot where it's time to bloom again. It's time to look around and go, listen, I know a lot of bad stuff has been done, but we can take this and we can turn it into something beautiful. We can become a Dorothy Clive garden. Our quarry can become a beautiful garden. It really is possible. Now, here are some of the in-depth stories that the news team and I worked on for you guys this week. Let's kick things off in Australia because we've been hanging out in Australia for a field messenger report. So what's one more story, guys? Australia's childcare system is under intense scrutiny with mounting concerns about safety, staffing, and oversight. A large portion of the sector is dominated by for-profit centers, which, according to a government report, often cuts corners, relying on underpaid casual staff and failing to meet basic staffing requirements. A recent union survey found 77% of centers fall below minimum staffing levels every week, and nearly half do so daily. Educators are overwhelmed with admin tasks, leaving minimal time to actually engage with children. And some centers manipulate rules by counting staff not present in childcare rooms.
Yingjiao Zhu has worked at 50 childcare centres over a decade. She says workers now have too much on their plates: lesson planning, report writing, cleaning up, even taking out the garbage.
To be very honest, doing all of those things in a day and over the weeks, it's pretty hard.
And that's before workers get to the most important task, caring for children.
Sometimes the days are gone by so fast and so busy that educators sometimes even, forget to, for example, drink water.
Meanwhile, inconsistent state-level enforcement of national regulations has allowed some unsafe centers to operate for years. Many experts argue deeper reforms are needed, including stronger regulation, better staff training, and consistent national oversight. Well, Germany is seeing a record surge in retail theft, with losses toppling 5 billion euros in 2024. That's a 3% increase from the year before, 2023. While some of the shoplifting is tied to rising poverty and desperation, much of it is driven by organized crime, with coordinated groups targeting high-value goods like cosmetics, meat, and electronics to resell for profit. Experts say about 2/3 of retail theft now falls into this category.
They know exactly what stores to hit, what businesses and residents to hit, when and where.
Coordinated groups are targeting stores, millions of dollars worth of goods. Retailers say they're growing more violent, putting shoppers and workers at risk, sometimes with tragic consequences.
The ripple effects go far beyond store shelves. Prices are rising, tax revenue is shrinking, and shoppers are footing the bill through higher costs. This isn't just a German problem either. Shoplifting is up 80% in the UK since 2022. International gangs are hitting French stores, and U.S. retailers lost more than $112 billion in 2022 due to similar crimes. With major chains closing stores and employee safety increasingly at risk, experts urge shoppers to be cautious when buying suspiciously cheap goods online and to support local businesses, which are less vulnerable to these kinds of targeted thefts. As governments around the world ramp up efforts to protect children online, new age verification laws are changing how people access digital content, but not without controversy. The UK and Ireland recently rolled out systems requiring users to confirm their age through ID checks or selfies to block access to adult material, while the EU is piloting a verification app in 5 countries as part of a broader digital safety law.
The new rules that take effect prohibit the uploading and sharing of materials such as cyberbullying, as well as videos promoting self-harm, suicide, and eating disorders. Platforms hosting pornographic or violent material must ensure they have effective age verification systems in place. The media regulator, Comisiún na Meán, says that simply ticking a box or inputting a date of birth is no longer sufficient, but it hasn't told platforms what types of age verification methods it wants them to use.
It has said to them, you decide how you're going to do it, but make sure you produce a robust system of age verification so that children cannot access a material that is harmful to them.
France has gone a step further, ordering major porn sites to verify users' ages. And in the U.S., 19 states now require age checks for explicit content, with Texas's law sparking debate over free speech. While these measures aim to shield kids from harmful content, critics warn they could compromise privacy, create barriers for vulnerable groups, and add new headaches for families using shared devices. Many experts argue that empowering parents and educating children might be a more effective and less invasive path forward. Child soldiers remain a devastating global issue, with thousands of children around the world being forcibly recruited, manipulated, or driven by poverty into armed conflicts. The rise of lightweight weapons has made it easier for militias to exploit children, who are used not only as fighters, but also as messengers, spies, and even in horrific roles like sex slaves or suicide bombers. Despite international laws prohibiting the recruitment of children under 18 and classifying the use of child soldiers under 15 as a war crime, countries like Myanmar continue to see rising cases, especially since its 2021 military coup.
Maybe the most chilling example of the exploitation was seen in the Iran-Iraq War during the 1980s. Iran deployed thousands of child soldiers in human wave attacks against Iraqi positions. These kids, sometimes as young as 9 years old, were given plastic keys to paradise around their necks and sent running through minefields, literally stepping over the bodies of their fallen friends. Iranian commanders viewed their deaths as necessary sacrifices, cheap and abundant ammunition in a holy war.
Recovery takes more than rescue. It requires long-term support through education, counseling, and community reintegration. While progress is slow, global awareness and action are essential to help these children reclaim their futures and break the cycle of violence. A new executive order signed by U.S. President Trump in April 2025 is causing major waves in the U.S. trucking industry by strictly enforcing an English proficiency requirement for all commercial drivers. Effective June 25th, this rule now bans the use of interpreters or translation apps during roadside inspections, requiring drivers to communicate solely in English with law enforcement and inspection officials.
So let's talk about what the actual executive order is. The executive order was signed to actually say that truck drivers must read and speak the basics of English. And that's pretty much what it says, right? So a lot of people are concerned with, why is this actually going in place? This is a country built on immigrants. Why do people have to speak English? When you think about the common sense things, right? I've been traveling around the world, and one of the things that we are definitely spoiled as Americans is, like for instance, I was in Dubai, and the signs in Dubai, there was letters I couldn't even read. But we are spoiled because they actually have it in English as well, so it's easy for us to communicate and go. If I was in a country that I had no idea what the signs meant, it would make it very dangerous for me as an individual driving, especially a big tractor trailer that I'm actually driving for money.
While aimed at improving road safety, the order has sparked backlash over fears of discrimination, worker shortages, and inconsistent enforcement, especially since there's no standardized language test, leaving decisions up to individual inspectors. Drivers found non-compliant can be taken off the road until a qualified replacement arrives, and in some states, like Arkansas, they may also face fines. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration is now working to develop formal language guidelines, but for now, the policy's impact on supply chains and the industry remains uncertain. Australia is making major strides in animal welfare, with new laws emphasizing stronger protections, tougher penalties for cruelty, and a deeper focus on responsible pet ownership. In the Australian Capital Territory, a draft code suggests dog owners spend at least 3 hours daily with their pets to prevent loneliness. sparking debate on enforcement and practicality. Meanwhile, South Australia has introduced legal duties of care for pet owners, expanded protections to include fish, and boosted oversight in areas like greyhound racing and animal research.
It could soon become a legal requirement in the ACT to spend 3 hours a day with your dog, and it has dog owners a little bit confused.
It seems a silly rule, only because if you are a dog owner, you'll spend more than 3 hours a day with your dog.
We spend 1 hour at the dog area, and then, pretty much all evening at home with us.
National reforms are also reshaping how pets are treated in family law, recognizing them as companion animals rather than mere property in separation cases. These changes reflect a broader cultural shift that sees animals as valued family members, with everyday actions from spending time with pets to reporting cruelty playing a key role in supporting their well-being. The abrupt shutdown of USAID following sweeping budget cuts and a Trump executive order has sent shockwaves through the global aid community. Once a cornerstone of U.S. foreign assistance, USAID's dismantling has left critical health, education, and humanitarian programs in crisis, especially in places like Congo, Sudan, and Afghanistan. Clinics are closing, cholera outbreaks are going unchecked, and vital supplies like HIV medication and post-rape kits have vanished. The effects extend beyond borders, with U.S. farms, nonprofits, and contractors losing major contracts.
When they were in business, USAID wasn't spending American taxpayer funds only on foreigners, as many claim. 80% of the companies that had contracts with the agency were American. USAID was investing money back into the pockets of as many as 50,000 American contractors employed by universities, nonprofits, and aid organizations. Because so much was affected, we can't cover it all in a single video. So we'll be focusing on the two most critical aspects of USAID, food and health. Huge USAID program, Food for Peace, bought surplus food from American farmers and delivered it to countries in need, benefiting over 4 billion hungry people worldwide since 1954. So when malnourished children received much-needed breakfasts in Afghanistan, or families in famine-prone Sudan lined up for a meal from an emergency kitchen, 41% of that food was sourced directly from American farmers who were paid about $2 billion annually.
As humanitarian groups scramble to fill in these gaps, the long-term consequences of losing one of the world's largest aid agencies are becoming painfully clear. Artificial intelligence is transforming our everyday life, but it's also powering a new wave of scams that are smarter, faster, and harder to detect. From voice cloning and deepfakes to fake rental listings and impersonated travel agents, scammers are using AI to trick people in increasingly convincing ways. While tech companies are fighting back with AI tools of their own, the arms race is escalating.
I don't know about you, but I've seen an increasing amount of videos showing older people, whether they're Gen X or boomers, getting tricked by AI slop content online. Now, many of these clips are supposed to be funny and lighthearted, but we're already starting to see some nefarious acts on the news, and some people are getting scammed out of tons of money. Now, of course, this has been a problem for years with all of the phone and email scams, but now you could be convinced by a scammer with video proof that really ends up just being AI content and tricks tons of people out of everything.
Booking.com reports a 500% to 900% increase in travel-related scams in just 18 months, and nearly a third of adults have been affected or know someone who has. The best defense? Stay alert, protect your personal info, and take action fast if you're targeted. Mindfulness, once rooted in ancient traditions, is now a well-researched practical tool for improving both mental and physical health. At its core, it's about being fully present, tuning into the moment with curiosity and without judgment.
All mindfulness is. It's being fully present to what's happening here inside you, what's happening here in your head, what's happening here in your environment, experiencing it wholly, not getting distracted, and if you do get distracted by other thoughts or other things in the environment, pulling yourself back to this present moment and experiencing it without judgment, not using those shortcuts of saying this is good or bad, but just describing it, experiencing it as it is.
Backed by hundreds of studies, mindfulness has been shown to reduce stress, anxiety, depression, inflammation, and even pain, offering benefits similar to some medications. From hospitals to schools, more people are embracing this simple yet powerful practice. And the best part? You don't need special tools. Just a few minutes a day can lead to lasting improvements in well-being. Now it's time for highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency. Kimberly Gogan is the head of the GIA, and she releases content throughout the week. She aims for 3 reports a week, but things are a little crazy right now. I'm sure you've noticed that just in your day-to-day events, things that you're doing, how your body is feeling. If you are more in tune with those things, you've been noticing a lot of changes. So let's talk about them. Kim did not release a report on Monday. She released a report on Tuesday. So let's talk about that. These are the type of reports that I personally love. And I know a lot of you too. When you focus more on, let's just call it the esoteric, it's so much more than that. It's just who we naturally are as organic beings on the side of source, on the side of light and goodness. When you talk about that, like, I don't know, I get all excited. What I'm not as excited about, even though the information is important, is knowing what the deep state is doing day after day, because they just keep doing pretty much the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And we all know that is the very definition of insanity. So they're crazy. And unless they're doing something that could harm us, what do we care, right? But this report, this has some really good nuggets in it, guys, because it extends beyond that. And we're dealing with other beings out there in the universe and what their roles were and how did we end up here? Like, it's the story of our history. So the first soundbite that I want to play goes back a long time. We are talking about a being called the Destroyer. And Kim has talked about this being before. As it turns out, and I think she has mentioned this before because I remember this fact, the Destroyer isn't just one being, and there's just a whole line of beings or species, let's just say, that call themselves the Destroyer. And now we're pretty much left with this one being, and was kind of wreaking some havoc for us. It was communicating directly with the true deep state and promising them lots of things. As you guys know, we are at the end of a very, very, very long battle. I'm not talking years. I'm not talking thousands of years. We are talking about millions and billions of years ago. And I think that in regards to the Destroyer, that it's been about 3 million years, I think that's what Kim said, since he's been to this planet. But he saw an opportunity to connect with the deep state, promise them riches and glory and blah, 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 blah. And instead, he's disappearing. So here's Kim with more.
You probably remember a little bit of talk I had with you about a being called the Destroyer. Turns out there is a whole species of destroyers out there, or was. Now we're just stuck with the main, or was stuck with the main being. The main being, I guess you would say, was the original lost soul. This is what Source described this being as. It wasn't always dark. It was probably the second being that came into creation, even before Lucifer, turns out. And he was the first, by lost soul, it was the first being to ever be cut off completely from Source. From him, there was quite a bit of revenge, let's say. He also was a being that created a lot of false universes, or universes of simulated universes, I guess you would say, everywhere. So he was the original creator of a lot of the simulations. So getting to the root of problems, as it relates to simulations was important. And you could say he was pretty dark. Definitely had a good hand in creating the original sin, so to speak, also had a big hand in creating a lot of the dark beings that we have come to know as some of them AI generated. And, well, leave it up to the secret space program to lead us right to him over the last few days. So it's something we've been fighting, since last week. I would say probably Tuesday, Wednesday. Turns out there was a system here on Earth that was left over. It was often used between Marduk and this being to communicate. And this being, turns out, gave the deep state, the SSP, a lot of access to this with a lot of promises. You see, this being hadn't been here in over 3 million Earth years, and he would like to come back. In exchange for their help and having him come back, he promised them all kinds of things, wealth and control of the financial system and control of Earth, and, well, they would become the new Galactic Council too. So a lot of promises being made by this being. As we located him based on their communications, we began to tear down the entire network. That was important. We had severed the network enough whereas he was not able to communicate with them by, Thursday, Friday of last week. I would say Friday. And when they lost contact with this being, they tried to make some other phone calls. And we'll talk about that here in just a few, because there's a long story with that, which actually ended up as a positive for us. So this being, they have made several attempts using whatever access he gave them of Marduk's of days gone by to try and get this being here in every way possible. You could call this being the Antichrist. You could call it the creator of Satan, the creator of Lucifer, you name it, the root of all evil. And they thought it was a good idea to bring him here. They did try. They've been sending lots of frequencies to try to break open any kind of portal unsuccessfully over the last few days, including, what happened last Wednesday to me. That wasn't going to happen. When they couldn't get me to consent to allowing this being to come into my person, they tried a number of their chosen people. They lined them up one by one and thought it was a good idea to try to see if any of them qualified. Of course, they picked the best and the ones that they thought could hold such a large energy. And a few of them didn't make it, really. Looks like a few of them are no longer with us due to this issue. And this sparked panic with another group. I know I've mentioned these people before, and it's been quite a while, but I called them at the time, and I still call them, the Watchers. And the beings we know as the Watchers are humans. They are humans. They are human descendants of other Watchers over and over and over again. You could say they were tied to Enoch and Noah and some others we have known throughout our history, and many others we don't know. The Watchers are not inherently evil. However, they are a little bit misled. And they were told that if we got to a point where the end of time would happen, then as a direct result, they would wipe out the human species. So they have worked with the deep state and a number of those people for a long time because they felt that it was necessary to preserve humans on this planet. They also felt most recently in the last 48 hours that we were entering what they called the times of Enoch. And by the times of Enoch, it was about the story. I guess you can probably find some information about this. But with Enoch, allegedly, he was taken to a better city, a better place, in exchange for his service, so to speak, to the angels, maybe? I don't know the story as it's told on the internet, but these people thought it was the end of time. I mean, that we were all going to die, this other being was going to come back, probably because the deep state convinced them of such, and that they needed them to help the deep state in order to allow this being to come here in order to save humanity. That was interesting. Like, I don't think so. This is not happening in any way, shape, or form. And the amount of stories, you know, that are out there, and the amount of lies, I swear the whole world must run on bull feces at this point. And I'm sure of it. But they pretty much lie to everybody. And so, you know, this little group here would be no exception. You know, because they are the watchers and they do work with the deep state, oftentimes, you know, we could find these people within most of the religions, you know, at the higher levels, you know, with like the Vatican and the Mormons and the Russian Orthodox Church. You know, we could find them in most of these places. We can also find them, you know, in some of those higher level meetings within the deep state. You know, they're always a part of everything, but yet a part of nothing at the same time. You know, however, some of their views are pretty skewed. Instead of trying to solve the problem, they just accept that this is going to happen. You know, and if they had their way, they would be building an ark, you know, like Noah, in order to save the human species and animals 2 by 2 into some boat because Earth is about to get wiped out and we need to restart the human species, I guess. I don't know what they were. It's what it appeared they were trying to plan on doing because they thought this was going to be over pretty soon as the deep state got this guy here. They also felt like this being, we call the destroyer, was going to deliver the wrath of God any day now, probably within the next couple of weeks. They thought it was a definite certainty because they didn't do their job, and not just wrath on them. They would be saved for trying their best to save humanity, so to speak, but deliver the wrath of God here on the planet, you know, probably apocalypse number 94, as we've almost had many times, but no luck. So the being is disintegrating unto himself, and all of the power and control that he had is also disintegrating.
So how many of you, when Kim mentioned the Watchers, thought of that TV series Fringe? I recently, I think this was last year, I rewatched the whole series because I knew I'd missed episodes when it was originally released. And I went back and watched it. It's fascinating, by the way, because, you know, they have to give us chunks of truth and the stuff that they put out there, you know, thinking that that's informed consent, which it absolutely is not. But it is interesting to go back and watch this. And they talk about a group called the Watchers. Now, Fringe takes it, you know, they're going to embellish it. They're going to make stuff up, right? So it's not necessarily how Fringe talked about the Watchers, but, you know, their Watchers were, these people would kind of come in and out of time at certain times to witness certain things happen on our planet. I don't think they had hair. They were very pale in complexion. I'm not saying that's what these Watchers look like, but it is a group of people that is watching over humanity. I just find that very interesting. Okay, so Kim talks a little bit more about the secret space program operatives and how they thought that they were going to get a lot of things that Marduk was formerly in control of. It's kind of like Marduk's inheritance. They thought they were going to take over a bunch of stuff, okay? So Kim talks a little bit more about that and how that's not going to happen. But the second soundbite that I want to play is about a visitation that we got from a group of non-human beings from the Galactic Federation. Kim has talked about the Galactic Federation in the past, how there were positive beings that were part of that group and how there were not so positive beings that were part of that group. But they came back and started connecting with the deep state, which Kim originally thought was a threat. Now, we were told they weren't a threat, but Kim had to dissect this a little bit more. And as it turns out, the deep state was just lying to this group. You know that never turns out well. So let's learn a little bit more about what happened from Kim.
So Marduk, before his departure as Commandant of the Galactic Federation, had told a certain group that they were to protect a certain quadrant of the galaxy, being our galaxy, and that they were not to come back for about a decade in Earth's time. So, much to their surprise, they did try reaching out on the Commandant line a number of times over the years and was unable to reach Marduk anymore, obviously, until recently when they tried, or got a message, I should say. It was an incoming message, and it was through the Marduk line. It came, though, from the Secret Space Program folk who recently acquired said line from this dark being. And basically, it was a call for help. They needed help getting this being here. They were cut off from communications, by the end of last week, and they needed them to come back immediately to help. And of course, well, without further ado, they arrived last night. Which, of course, left me with a whole lot of work trying to figure out who these people are, where they came from, why are they talking to them. Allegedly, the councils were saying they were not our enemy. It certainly felt like it last night, and, on we went through the entire night. The deep state basically said I was the enemy. I was not allowing this to occur. This being wants this to occur. They promised them, great wealth, big positions, just like they promise all the humans, with no ability whatsoever to give any of these positions to anybody at this moment, of course, and never will, actually, if we have anything to say about it. So, because beings like this, these were non-human members of the Galactic Federation, because these beings have a little bit of skill, just like the Secret Space Program does, they're, let's just say, well armed with the ability to talk telepathically. They are well armed with their own personal lie detectors. They are well armed with a lot of special gifts and tools to become part of the Galactic Federation. So for many, many years, they did serve Marduk, and, well, we found out a lot more information about them. So Argatha, and this information came from them in the council and also the Council of Five, as we were trying to figure out what do we do. I mean, we were about to attack these people, non-people people, overnight, because it appeared that they were planning on trying to help these people out. And we weren't going to have that now, were we? Not in any way, shape, or form. They did, some of the lower end folks didn't realize they came until this morning, and It's being passed, the information that I'm about to tell you is being passed down the ranks. It hasn't hit government level or Pentagon level, but it's definitely hit probably global headquarters and some of the higher end Black Sun people and whatever's left of it, probably table level and that kind of thing. So in having talks with them and the council for the last 24 hours, and also these other people, we're basically telling them they're full of it, you know, and we all told them the whole story about what happened with Marduk and what happened with the ambassadorship and then, you know, who I am and then I'm not what the deep state says I was. I know that was not a shocker for them. Apparently they had been kind of doubting what they were saying anyway because they were acting very erratically and trying to play let's make a deal. And that's not something Marduk would have ever done with people like this. Apparently the secret space program, or at least the ones that used to travel about as part of the Galactic Federation, felt that these were more comrades. You know, we'll take you with us. We're on the way to complete and total success and control, and we're going to take over, you know, Marduk's positions. And look, he already gave us some access to the systems, you know, in good faith, so we could help bring this dark being here. And we haven't been able to reach him in a couple of days, but he'll call us. He'll call us. We know it. Yeah, right. So in our talks, we talked a lot about Argatha. Now, my understanding was, and as far as I was aware, our term for Argatha, and remember, you know, sometimes I see things as without a name. You know, it's the same way with this alpha system when I started using it. I understood how it worked. I didn't know like the official name for this or for that. In this particular case, is kind of the same. You know, I always looked at Argatha as the beings that lived on this planet that lived in another density or dimension. And that in part is true. I just didn't understand how it was all constructed. So after the wars, and we've had many, but after some of the wars, longer than 250,000 years ago, I believe it probably went back for quite a long time. I would say millions of years, Argatha has been around. And Argatha is a term that you could say Middle Earth, you know, that's what they called it. However, that's not the whole story. Argatha was a density that was, you could say, made up of a third in densities. So in other words, if densities of existence have 9 planes, you could say that those planes and the planes in between planes and so on and so forth were divided between the dark or false dark and false light and false neutral. And these planes, worlds or universes, so to speak, the universes of Argatha, were where most of the Galactic Federation hung out. You could call these worlds, which were formed after a war broke out, in the densities that were created, let's call them artificial densities. And a few reports ago, I talked about densities 10, 11, 12, and into infamy. And all of those densities were birthed out of this Argatha. Unfortunately, even those beings that created false universes were also at war to some degree. And of course, As any beings that are dark or false light, they all want power and control. Even if it was over artificial universes and simulations, but power and control is what they wanted. So there was a war that did break out in the, let's just call them, I hate to say upper densities and lower densities, lower than low and upper than higher than high. But there was a war at one point, and these beings of these densities, all artificially created, of course, came to somewhat of a peace agreement and formed Argatha. And you could say it was Argatha served as a number of different things. Number one, it served as almost like a border crossing from the dark side of the omniverse and artificial universes as well, and simulations, to the light side. You could say that the Galactic Federation, both human and non-human, served as border guards. They also had another job, which was to sell space and time. You see, the darker side of universes and artificial simulations and universes were nothing but space and time. You know, those were the two primary elements, so to speak, that existed. Now, in order to pass into the light side of universes, be them artificial or in reality, you must have space and time. So these guys here were also in charge of peddling space and time to those who wish to cross from the dark side over here, at least all the way up to what you call the incursion point, which was just past the 5th density. And travel about they did for a long, long time until a few years ago when we started shutting it all down. It probably started in about 2019 and continued on until not that long ago, and then now it's been simulations and false universes, and you know, for the last few weeks. So still a work in progress. Hopefully we'll be done soon, but it's definitely a lot of work. It's not like, oh, snap your fingers and make it go away. I wish it was that easy, but I think that we are definitely nearing the end, and hopefully we won't run into any more beings. But so the Galactic Federation was both dark and both light, as you know, and there were even some what you would say were neutral. And they were there specifically to ensure that there was no violation of the covenants of ownership and the Galactic Council as set forth by Marduk as Commandant. So Marduk often operated in the gray. And a lot of implied consent, a lot of dictatorship agreements and covenants, and you know, he pretty much gave himself full control and final say. You know, much like the Galactic Federation, there was a lot of separation and a lot of being kept in the dark, and he didn't really tell everyone the whole story. Just like the SSP clearly didn't have the whole story, so their thought process of being appointed, you know, masters of the universe in the next few days was flawed, because a being of this type could never give both sides. You know, even over false light and false dark simulations and universes, he could never give them both. What he wanted, this being did not tell the SSP, is he wanted to break into reality. That's basically what he wanted. And he wanted to use them to do it. Once that happened, there would be no longer any need for him. And he would take all roles, all realms, including the reality. But these people at the secret space program, you know, are stupid. They also told their returning Galactic Federation comrades that I didn't know what the heck I was doing, and I didn't know what was going on, and this is what they're doing, and they know everything. And, clearly their comrades did not believe them in any way, shape, or form. So a conversation with myself, the council, and the Council of Five was very welcome at that point. They got a lot of truth with a lot of proof, and that led them to wonder what to do with their comrades. You see, by this point, by the time we finally got a hold of them, they were already deeply interrogating their comrades because they knew that they were being lied to. They now wanted to know what the heck to do with them. So, with a better understanding of the council's role, with a better understanding of the Council of Five role, because these were beings they were never permitted to speak to in the past. Marduk would handle all that for them. You just do your job, he would say, kind of like rank and file in a military order. They now have some, not all, of a better understanding of what's happening. Now, over the course of the next 24, 48 hours, they're going to get a really good understanding of what really happened, who they are, what they did, what their job was, what it really was, and how Marduk lied to them. So there is when you're on the side of source, you're on the side of truth, and there is nothing we have to hide on our side.
All right, so all that was from Tuesday's report. Unfortunately, Kim did not have an opportunity to do a report on Friday. Friday was Lionsgate. We've been talking about Lionsgate quite a bit. This was not something in the past that was for the light side. This was a negative time, negative energy, bad things would happen. Regardless of what you've heard online, it really wasn't until last year that we were able to change things over, and this was perhaps first, second Lionsgate that was really on the side of source. So Friday was really busy because it was Lionsgate. Kim wasn't able to record, but she did post this message on the CARE Telegram thread. So I'll go ahead and read it to you. It says, today's Lionsgate is at its peak, and we have been battling. I know the last few days have been rough for nearly everyone I have talked to as they try to separate us from source. Loads of rituals from the deep state. Washington, D.C. and the Kremlin are on high alert for a false flag attack, which looks like it should be averted. Tomorrow is a full moon to top it all off, so that would have been Saturday. I will get a full report out on all the happenings tomorrow. Worst case, Sunday morning, my time. We will come out of the other end better than ever. Just hold on and hold on to the light. See, told you guys. She mentioned Washington, D.C. There was a lot of crazy stuff going on. But it's all good. So that is the latest update that I have for you guys. She has not released Sunday's report, at least not as of the time of this recording, so I will include that in next week's rundown episode. I appreciate you guys being with us today. If you want more information about United Network, who we are, and what we're all about, visit our website, unitednetwork.earth. If you decide to become a member, that will give you instant access to all of the content we put out there, and we put it out through our website, through our app, and that includes complete news updates, our New Earth interviews, Global Intelligence Agency reports, and all things restoration. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.